Yeah, I think the problem there is most trainers are probably thinking of my job is to produce results, and so I need to like punish you with this workout. And yeah, you're right. It takes a certain level of maturity to understand, both from the client and from the trainer, that if we're doing this, this is a long-term game, right? Like if we want to get ripped in 6 weeks,
Right.
like we're already missing the point, right? Like if you're truly interested in getting into good health, then that should mean you want to be in good health for the rest of your life. And it's just like, I would equate it to like, if you want to learn a musical instrument, you're not going to learn to be, a classical pianist or a Eddie Van Halen in 6 to 8 weeks. It's going to take years of regular, consistent, diligent practice. And maybe people don't like to hear it, but it's just the fact of the matter. Like if you want to make a change, it's going to require making a change in your habits and your lifestyle and all of those things. And like you've said,
And
if
that's
you're,
what feels really good, right? Like in the end, that's what
yeah,
actually feels good. So that's a goal.
yeah, it's accepting the discomfort in the early stage of making the change, but once you commit to it, everything gets better, everything feels better, and you don't need to be in this huge rush. Most people can't maintain the lifestyle change because it becomes a radical change, right? And so the approach should, like what I often tell new clients when we're doing new workouts is like, I really want to be hitting like a 7 out of 10 in terms of the intensity of this workout. I don't want you to feel like you've never worked this hard in your whole life. And I want to do, 3 or 4 workouts that feel like a 7, maybe an 8 at the most. And then every so often we push your limits and take you to an 8 or a 9. But even though the perceived exertion feels like a 7, you should notice that slowly the weights are going up and the volume is increasing. We're able to do more work, and you feel your mobility. And then you come back to me in 6 or 8 weeks and go like, man, I was just climbing the stairs and I couldn't believe I felt like I could hop up 2 at a time, and I haven't done that since I was a kid. That's you
And
kind of want it to be like this invisible progress almost.
right. And that's such a great point too, because I think, Chris, as you say, there has to be trust, right?
Mm-hmm.
Has to be trust. So your client needs to trust you.
Mm-hmm.
In order for the client to trust you, you also need to prove yourself that you've heard them and you understand their goals. And then you sort of
Mm-hmm.
have to get to work, but it's not something that you want to be. I love that it's a 7 out of 10, where it's like, if you're having your ass kicked all the
Mm-hmm.
time, you're probably going to abandon that, right? There's not long-term
Pretty
success,
quickly.
sustainable success in that. So your ideal workout is one that you enjoy doing, that is
Mm-hmm.
challenging for your body and your brain, and has
Mm-hmm.
like long-term successes. That's the stuff you rave about, right? That is like,
Mm-hmm.
I can't believe how much better I feel in my body than I did 10 years ago, not a month-long goal that I need to
Yeah.
lose 5 pounds and then that's it, right?
Yeah. And the neat thing about that approach is it's actually not new. Like one of my early mentors studied Russian weightlifting teams' training logs. And he basically came to the conclusion that about 70% of their lifts, 60 to 70% of their lifts are in the 70% zone of their maximum potential intensity. So let's say for easy numbers, they can lift 100 kilograms over their head. Most of the volume of their work they do in a year is in the 70 kilogram range, and then 10 to 15% is below that, and 10 to 15% is going above that. So like they're only lifting near their max like 5% of the time, a couple times when they're trying to hit new records. And the whole idea is like what kind of the Russians were famous for was longevity, right? Like other countries who went balls to the wall, the injury rates are higher. The talent pool is much smaller because they're basically counting on exceptional genetics from kind of a couple people who end up, they can just endure that kind of punishment, but
Right.
not most people, right?
Right. And as a good trainer, if you're working with a good trainer, you're doing a good workout, there can be like joy in that too, right? Whereas it doesn't need to be exceptional. It's like that, it's actually the joy in movement can be for everyone.
Yeah, yeah. And again, so probably I should go back to the point of it also depends on what your goal is, right? So if you're someone who's saying, I've been in pain for the last 5 years and I've had this chronic thing, it's not at all about pushing to your max intensity. It's really about resolving this pain issue. And that's probably going to be much more about discovering, what are the triggers that cause the pain? What are the things that give you relief? And now let's sprinkle in more and more of the things you find relieving and try to find ways to remove the things that keep provoking your pain, because most people are stuck in these negative feedback loops with pain, and they constantly provoke it without realizing it. So a lot of it's about.
Yeah, I mean, you speak and it makes so much sense. And I guess just for anybody that's listening, also to understand that weightlifting, it's when they're doing something that's so heavy in their training, all of their training doesn't happen to be in lifting weights. They would also be working on their breath work. They would also be working on healthy feet to hold, right? Like a stable ground and their balance and their multidimensional movement, which is one of the reasons why I put exercise snacks in the Wellness Intelligence Collective, is not because any one move can solve anything, but it's about breaking it down to understand that even if you're trying to have more gorgeous arms, that doesn't mean that practicing all of those other movement patterns aren't going to serve you in your goal, correct? Like there's some variety that needs to happen. And that goes back to trusting your trainer. And it's like, no, I said I want stronger legs. And it's like, okay, but we're going to work on biceps a little bit. They're all connected, right?
Yeah, things is so I mean I would kind of go back to the goal should take precedence. So if your goal is I want really massive arms, there should definitely be a bias in your training towards arm training. I don't think, like personally, I don't think it makes a lot of sense to focus on having big arms and neglect everything else, right? Like it's just you're setting yourself up for a disaster in the long term. So as a trainer, I would highly advise we probably want to create balance among things like breath work, mobility, core strength, lower body strength. However, if you were telling me, listen, I just love massive biceps and triceps and that's what I want, then if you're hiring me to help you do that, I'm definitely going to make sure we prioritize, like, you're probably going to train your arms 2 or 3 times a week. And I'm probably going to try to slip in the other things that I think are good for you. And that would go in any case. If you're an endurance athlete, I mean, I'm probably not the guy to come to, and if you're an endurance thing, because that's not my passion, but the same principle applies. We're going to make sure we're working on your endurance training, and I'm going to do all of the things in the gym that are going to help keep you in kind of road ready condition. So we're going to look at what are the common injuries that let's say runners suffer from the most, and are there things we can do to strengthen and build resilience so that you can take a bit more pavement pounding. We can do a full body assessment to say, how does this individual body going to respond to a lot of pavement pounding? Do we need to do some work on the hips? Do we need to do some ankle footwork, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? And if I've got somebody who's saying, I really want to do CrossFit, but their hip mobility is atrocious and they have a history of disc herniations, there's a lot of things we need to address before we start looking at doing clean and jerks and snatches if we're going to do them safely, right? Like everything's context dependent. So it's
yeah, as you say, context dependent. And as I'm listening to you speak, a couple of things come up for me. Number one, you have the experience and the intelligence to actually hold these conversations and create amazing pathways for your clients. Also, you're listening. So it's saying, if I really want those big arms, like, and that's what I'm coming to, that even though you're going to sneak other things in, you're also going to listen to what my goals are and help me achieve them. And I think, that's a real gift in a trainer, to have such a broad scope of awareness and intelligence and a desire to help a client reach their goals, as opposed to, we're going to burn calories and you're going to hurt tomorrow. And
yeah,
it's a different approach. And I guess that's the thing that I want to highlight, is that your intelligence, and so many people have that to offer, but there's lots of trainers that don't dial into that. And that's where we can find, an issue with cortisol spiking, because, as a woman in perimenopause, maybe you're not going to be pushing the same way that when you were in your 20s. We all are different phases and stages. And I love that you even said that you might not be the best person for someone who wants to train for X. And
sure.
You be honest about that is also amazing. That's what we need more of in this world, I think.
Yeah. And it's just going back to what we were talking about earlier, like this is one of the benefits of having experience and having a broad range of interests and a lot of different courses under my belt, and having a huge array of different clients. but you talked about earlier, I think it was like ego-driven male trainers, and wanting to like, you know, kick their clients' butts and make them burn calories and give them a punishing workout. And a lot of times when you only have a hammer, everything's a nail, right? And so just once again, you know, in my case, I'm fortunate enough to have been around the block a few times and have worked in clinical settings with people in rehab situations. I've worked in gyms. I've spent time in Olympic weightlifting and powerlifting gyms, and kind of, you know me a little bit, and you know that I follow through on my interests, right? So whether it's raising pigs or beef cattle, or, you know, gardening, or if it's fitness, I'm just kind of all in, wanting to know who's the best at this in the world and what can I learn from them, and then how can I apply that in my context or my situation. So yeah, it's a lot of fun. I love doing it. I love helping people feel better, and I just kind of love understanding how the human body works, whether that's from a fitness perspective or a movement perspective or a nutrition perspective. It's a lot of fun to be able to, you know, here's our strategy, we're going to implement this, and then actually see. And the most fulfilling and rewarding part is to actually see people who you spent 12 weeks or 6 months or a year with come back to you and report how it's changed their life outside of the gym. And yeah,
and as you speak, Chris, and you're saying, this is what I do, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I was going to ask you, what can people look for when they're looking for a trainer? And you covered that so beautifully. And the biggest thing that you mentioned, besides experience, is your passion. And it's your desire, right? It's not just a job that makes you money. It's you want to see your clients succeed and feel good. And it goes outside of the workout itself. It's not contained to that time with you. You're hoping people take it back to something else. And that's what I think we all need in workouts. It's, you know, for yoga, they say it's like showing up to the mat. That's the hardest part, is actually showing up to do the workout. But then it's whatever you're learning there and whatever you're taking, it's about taking it back into life. And I love that, you know, that's your way of doing it. And the fact that you have a huge toolbox and all of the, I would say, knowledge and wisdom, as well as the technical side of things, makes you feel very safe and trusted. And that's what we need to really find, you know, for somebody who's listening who doesn't have direct physical access to you. Can they train on Zoom with you? Can you train on Zoom?
Yeah, I'm really a big fan of in-person interactions, and it's because the type of training that I do often, well, I would say one of the things I specialize in is helping bridge the gap between kind of pain and dysfunction into performance, right? And so, you know, my wife Brandy's a physiotherapist, and so a lot of times I'm working with clients that have come through her or other therapists who are just on the trail end of something. And so we're looking at kind of restoring proper function, and then moving into performance workouts. And that's trickier to do on Zoom, because sometimes I want you to hop up on a table and I want to check either range of motion, or I want to do a muscle test, or I want to try like a fascial stretch therapy technique to see if I can make an instant change in the sensation, and then hop straight into an exercise technique. So I'm not opposed to Zoom workouts, but I think there's a huge value at in person. And yeah, it's not where my heart and my passion is through Zoom. So I'd really like to focus on the in person. I hope that's not too disappointing for anybody who might be interested.
Listen, for anybody who's actually listening, that we should tell them that they can stay at an Airbnb, and
that's right,
on your farm and train with you and see Brandy. So
yeah.
There'll be a link to follow. That's why I'm asking you for this advice. It's like, if you're serious about training, it's maybe worth the destination visit to
yeah, absolutely. So you could do like a long weekend stay. You could take a full week and stay in our beautiful Airbnb tiny home on our farm with a nearly panoramic view from the Niagara Escarpment. Even though we're in Creemore,
I've stayed there. I can give you that recommendation. Anybody, that testimonial and recommendation. It's incredible.
Yeah. And so we have on site, we'll have private personal training, physiotherapy, as well as fascial stretch therapy. And if people aren't familiar with fascial stretch therapy, all I can say is come try it. and it'll change the way you feel about everything. Nothing's quite the same as a 1 hour fascial stretch treatment.
Yeah, we should go into like the infomercial business. I feel like we did a good
Uh,
job. Like casual
Absolutely.
conversation, but Chris is the best, and you should go see him.
Yeah, and there was one point I had failed to make a moment ago that I wanted to touch on is when you're a client, it's very, very difficult to know if your trainer is an exceptional trainer. Most people really just know if I like this person, right? And so one of the important tips I would kind of suggest is just ask a lot of questions. Try to determine if this is someone who is thoughtful, who is listening to you, who is responsive. The credentials don't always equal an exceptional, high quality, thoughtful person. And yeah, really, like a lot of trainers go a long way on personality. I'll kind of say that. So
Like packaging on food, right? Like
yes, exactly. Great analogy.
ask enough questions that you get to the core of the matter, no pun intended.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that insight, and I know a lot of people will appreciate it.